Hey everyone, my name is Clever Clubber, and I am a freshman in college right now, but I took calculus in high school. So today we're going to be doing this derivatives review worksheet, and in case you didn't know, this exact worksheet and the answers to the worksheet are linked below, so if you want to follow along with me while we do it, or do the worksheet first and then come back, feel free to. Also, I'm outside because there's a lot of noise in my house, but there might be some noise out here too, so I'm sorry in advance. Hopefully it stays pretty quiet. We're just gonna go into it. So this first one's pretty easy because there are no x's and both of these are just numbers. The derivative is just 0. And then on the second one, we're gonna practice the power rule here. So we have 3 things separated by a plus or a minus. So for this first one, you're going to drop the 3 in the exponent and then subtract 1 from the original exponent. So that's how we get 3x squared. And then for the second value, remember that a derivative of a number and an x is just that number. And then the derivative of a number is just 0. So then this next one is another power rule. And this one's a little tricky. So I would probably just write the 8 and keep that and then bring the negative 2/5 down, and then you're going to have x. And remember that, so negative 2/5 minus 1 or 5/5, that's going to be negative 7/5. And then I would simplify that, and that's how you get negative 16 over 5. But I would just be careful because the negatives and the fractions are kind of tricky. Now for number 4, so you could rewrite the root x, but I just went right into it and brought the 1/2 to the front because we're just using the power rule here. And then you're going to subtract 1, and that's how you get negative 1/2. And then the second part, this is really easy because the derivative of e to the x it's just the same thing. So for number 5, it's a pretty similar problem, but before we go on, I just want to say that a lot of my work you could further simplify, but I'm just wanting to practice derivatives, so I'm probably not going to do that on this. And then number 5, okay, so here I want to use the power rule, so I'm going to switch the exponent to bring it up and make it negative. So I'm going to drop the negative 7 and then subtract 1 to get negative 8, and then make sure to keep the root 10 in front. And then for this problem, a lot of people might try to use the quotient rule here, but I only really like to do that when there's an exponent in the numerator and the denominator. So that's why I wanted to use the power rule here, just because I think it's easier. So for this next one, number 6, we are going to use the quotient rule. And so right here, I'm just writing down that little rhyme that I'm sure I'll know to help myself keep everything straight. So low d high minus high d low, and put that all over low low. So just for this first one, I just wrote out the little rhyme to keep everything straight, and that's what helps me. Obviously, you don't have to do that if you don't want to. Okay, so let's get started. So for this one, I'm just gonna rewrite root x, and then to take the derivative of this, I use the power rule, and that's how I got 2x plus 4, and then minus, and then we're gonna rewrite the top. I don't know why it's taking me so long. I'm having to think about it. Sometimes it's hard. That's why I wrote my little rhyme to the side. So x squared plus 4x plus 3. And then we're going to take the derivative of the low. And you could rewrite this as like x to the 1/2 to the side, but I just jumped right into it. And so that's the power rule again. And then, like the rhyme, I'm going to put that all over low, low. And so for this, you also could stop and write root x squared, but that is just x, so I just went straight away and rewrote that. And on this one, I would just be careful with parentheses to keep everything straight, just like I did right here. So for number 7, I'm going to rewrite it because that second part looks a little bit tricky. So I would just rewrite and bring up the exponent, but remember to make the power negative when you bring it up, and also just that the root 4, that's going to go on the denominator when you bring the power up. But after that, gets a lot easier. So I hope y'all can see. Sorry, it's like literally at the very bottom, but so I'm just gonna take the derivative. So regular power rule, bring the 2 forward, and then bring the negative 3/4 forward. But remember, because it was minus, now 2 negatives make a positive, and then the new exponent is going to be negative 7 to the 4th. Okay, I think the wind chimes have stopped now. But so number 8 is our first example of the product rule. So remember that the order doesn't really matter here, but I'm going to take the derivative, then keep it the same. So that's how I got 2x and then e to the x, and then plus, then I'm going to keep the same and take the derivative. And so I'm just underlining to like remind myself of what I did. And also, I know it's kind of weird because it's e to the x and e to the x, but it's just because the derivative of e to the x is e to the x. So then number 9 is the quotient rule again. So I didn't write out our little rhyme this time because I think I remembered it. So we're going to start by just bringing up x cubed, and then I'm taking some time to think about it. And then remember that the derivative of ln to the x is just 1 over x, minus, keep the same, ln of x, and then regular power rule, 3x over 2, and then all over low. So then I just wrote x to the 6th, but you could write out x cubed and then times 2. And remember, when right there, you're going to multiply your exponents instead of adding them. Okay, so I flipped the page. We're on number 10. So this is going to be quotient rule again. So I didn't write out our little rhyme, but remember, low d high minus high d low over low. So first, just rewrite the low, and then normal power rule, derivative is 3 minus, remember your parentheses, so just rewriting the high, and then just like the top, the derivative is going to be 2, and that's all over 2x plus 1 squared. Okay, and then number 11, so this one's a lot harder just because the e to the x kind of freaks me out sometimes. So I think for this one, I rewrote out my little rhyme. I don't really know why, because we just did the quotient rule. I guess I just like didn't want to confuse myself. So I rewrote that. Don't forget, low d high minus high d low over low. So on this one, we're gonna write out the bottom. So I was really thinking about this one. X plus e to the x. And then to take the derivative of this one, we're going to have to use the product rule because it's a little confusing. So remember, it might be helpful to stop and rewrite this as -1 times e to the x minus x times e to the x, but I just skipped that step. And then so on to the next, just rewriting that, and then to take the derivative of the top, that's what we get. And then I'm just rewriting low. So x plus e to the x, keep the parentheses, and then square it. And then again, with the quotient rule, it gets pretty tricky, so try to be really careful with your parentheses. Okay, and this one it's just a product rule run, but you have to memorize the derivatives of these. Oh, I'm sorry. On number 11, I'm going back and just like reminding myself of what I did. So this is the product rule on that one, and that's why it's more tricky. But just slow down and take time to think about it. Like, yeah, you gotta do it. Okay, number 12. So just like normal product rule, I'm going to write secant again, and then the derivative of tan, as I'm sure you remember, is secant squared. So then plus, and then the derivative of secant is secant theta tan, and then you just keep it the same, so it's just tangent. And then number 13 is also the product rule. So, oh, there, I'm just going back to underline to keep everything straight. Also, the order that you do it in doesn't really matter. So, like, on that one, I started by keeping it the same, then taking the derivative, then adding, and then I took the derivative and kept it the same. But you'll see on the next one, I don't even do that same order. So, like, I took the derivative of 12t to the 4th first. So 4 times 12 is 48, t, 4 minus 1 is 3, and then I kept the cosine the same, plus, and I don't know why I put a minus first, plus 12 t to the 4th to keep it the same. And then on this one, remember that the derivative of cosine is a negative sign. So then 14, oh, I forgot, I am doing my little underlining thing. So then 14 is going to be quotient rule, like we've been doing, and we're pros at it now. You can hear the birds in the background, and that you're enjoying these nature sounds. Sometimes it's nice to relax while you're doing math. So for this one, just going to rewrite the low, take the derivative of the high, so that's just going to be 3, subtract, rewrite the top, and then right here, remember that the derivative of cosecant, so that's going to be negative cosecant times cotangent, and then all over cosecant, and then I almost forgot to square it, but then I got it in there. Then number 15. So this is going to be normal power rule first, and then that weird rule about like a to the x. The derivative of that is a to the x ln a. So I just wrote that to the side because I saw it and I didn't want to forget it while I was doing the problem. So once we start, we're just going to bring that 3 forward, doing our normal power rule. Oh, I don't know, I almost erased. So t to the 2nd minus, okay, 3t ln 3. So that's just like a rule you have to memorize. Yeah. So then number 16. This one's a little weird because of that inverse of tan, but we got it. So we're going to keep the 2, and then remember that the derivative is 1 over 1 plus x squared. And so, but then we have that 2, that's the constant, so that's why I wrote that. And then also remember that the derivative of ln of x is 1 over x. So then 17, this is kind of similar to number 15 because it's the quotient rule. So I just started by rewriting the bottom, then taking the derivative of the top, and then you see that a to the x rule come in again. So 5x ln 5, and then we're going to do minus the top, 5x, and then normal power rule, 5x to the 4th. Don't forget your denominator, and then again, so 5 times 2 is 10. 18. So we've got another product rule here. So let's get started. This one's a little tricky because of the arc sign or the inverse sign. But if you just remember, keep the constant, so the 3, and then the derivative of that is going to be root 1 minus x squared. And then we're just going to multiply that, keeping the same, cosine x, plus rewriting the same, 3 arc sign x, and then the derivative of cosine is, of course, negative sine x. And then 19, we've got another quotient rule again. Super exciting. Oh, I always forget. I'm sorry. So I went back to double check myself because I just wanted to make sure I did it right. And so I just underlined the ones that I kept the same. So, of course, you have 2 that you took the derivative of, 2 that are just rewritten. So starting this quotient rule on number 19, we're just going to keep the same. And then, of course, the derivative of inverse secant is 1 over x root x minus, oh my gosh, I'm sorry, no, x squared minus 1. That one's really tricky. I always forget that one. So then minus, of course, we're rewriting inverse secant, and then to take the derivative of ln of x, it's 1 over x, and then don't forget your denominator. So I'm just rewriting ln of x, and then squaring it. Okay, yay, our last problem. So, oh, sorry, a bug. We're just gonna jump right into it. This is a product rule. So I'm taking the derivative first. So that's why I'm writing secant x and then tan x. And then I'm just keeping it the same. So rewriting inverse cosecant, then of course plus, and then I'm keeping it the same. So I just rewrote secant times, and then, okay, it gets tricky, but if you remember that the derivative of inverse cosecant is going to be negative 1 over x root x squared minus 1. So that's definitely a tricky one. And then again, I'm just going back to make sure with these product rules that I have these 2 that I kept the same, and then check the derivatives of those 2. So yay, we're done with the worksheet. I hope that y'all enjoyed the animal noises in the background, like the birds and nature. And if you didn't, then you can just watch someone else's videos, because remember that we didn't go over the chain rule in this video. But there are 2 more that you should definitely check out. So before you leave, definitely like and subscribe. I hope everything made sense and that this was helpful. I know sometimes it's tricky, but if I can do it, y'all can definitely do it. Okay, bye for now.